The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister emerge from the bathroom, her face wrapped in gauze like a mummy fresh from the tomb. This was her fourth procedure in 8 months, and each time, Mom had the same explanation ready: she needs surgery. But what I discovered in the medical bills hidden in Mom's purse would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family's love and my own future. The call came on a Wednesday evening while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my downtown consulting firm. Mom's voice carried that familiar mix of concern and urgency that had become her signature tone whenever discussing my younger sister Emma. "Darling, I hate to bother you during work hours, but Emma's having complications from her rhinoplasty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The surgeon says she needs immediate corrective surgery." Her words rushed together like she'd rehearsed them. "I know you've been generous with the family account, but this is truly an emergency." I pressed the phone closer to my ear, drowning out the hum of late-night office activity around me. "Mom, this is the 4th procedure this year. What kind of complications are we talking about?" A pause stretched between us, filled only by the distant sound of classical music playing in Mom's background. She always listened to Mozart when she was stressed. "Dr. Whitmore says there's significant tissue damage. Something about the cartilage not healing properly. Honey, you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely necessary. The family account, my inheritance from Grandma Catherine, carefully invested and grown over the past 5 years since I'd graduated from business school. What had started as a modest trust fund had flourished under my management, reaching nearly $200,000. Mom had been designated as co-signer when I was 21, back when I trusted her judgment implicitly. How much are we talking about this time?" I asked, already dreading the answer. $35,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but Dr. Whitmore is the best reconstructive surgeon on the West Coast. Emma's face, Mom's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion. "She's been through so much already. We can't let her suffer because of money." I stared out my office window at the city lights below, each one representing someone else's late-night struggles and difficult decisions. Emma had always been the delicate one, the sister who needed protection and care. Growing up, I'd been the responsible older daughter, the one who earned scholarships and worked part-time jobs while Emma focused on her modeling aspirations and beauty pageants. "Send me the medical documentation," I finally said. "I want to review everything before authorizing another withdrawal." "Of course, sweetheart. Dr. Whitmore's office will have all the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning." "You're such a good sister, Victoria. Emma is so lucky to have you looking out for her." After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of my office, surrounded by financial projections and strategic plans for my clients. Victoria Chen, 27 years old, senior consultant at Morrison & Associates, known for my analytical mind and attention to detail. These same skills that made me successful in business were now raising uncomfortable questions about my family's recent financial requests. I pulled up my banking app and scrolled through the transaction history for the family account. March 15, $28,000 for Emma's emergency breast augmentation revision. May 3, $42,000 for a medically necessary tummy tuck following what Mom described as complications from appendix surgery. July 20, $31,000 for facial reconstruction after what was allegedly a softball accident during Emma's recreational league game. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Each procedure was described as urgent, medically necessary, requiring the absolute best surgeon's money could buy. Each time, Mom had medical documentation that seemed legitimate, complete with doctors' letterheads and detailed explanations of complications that only expensive corrective surgery could fix. But something felt wrong. Emma had always been vain about her appearance, sure, but she'd never been accident-prone or unlucky enough to require this level of medical intervention. And Mom's explanations, while detailed, always seemed rehearsed, as if she'd practiced delivering bad news with just the right amount of maternal concern. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical Seattle weather that matched my increasingly dark mood. I'd spent most of the night researching Dr. Whitmore and his practice, finding glowing reviews and impressive credentials, but also noting his specialization in elective cosmetic procedures rather than emergency reconstructive work. Mom had texted me early with Dr. Whitmore's office number and Emma's patient information, along with a photo of Emma looking pale and bruised, her nose clearly swollen beneath the bandages. The image tugged at my heart, reminding me of childhood days when I'd comforted Emma after playground falls and bad dreams. I called Dr. Whitmore's office during my lunch break, expecting to speak with a nurse or administrative assistant about Emma's upcoming procedure. Instead, I was transferred directly to Dr. Whitmore himself, his voice smooth and professional with a hint of confusion. "Miss Chen, I appreciate your call, but I think there might be some misunderstanding. Emma hasn't experienced any complications from her recent rhinoplasty. In fact, she's healing beautifully and won't need any follow-up procedures for at least 6 months." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My mother told me Emma was having emergency complications requiring immediate surgery." Dr. Whitmore's tone became more cautious. "I'm bound by patient confidentiality, but I can tell you that Emma's current healing process is entirely normal. There's no medical need for additional surgery at this time. Perhaps your mother misunderstood something I said during our last consultation." I thanked him and ended the call, my hands shaking slightly as I set down the phone. The lunch I'd been eating turned to ash in my mouth as the implications settled over me. Mom had lied, not just a small misunderstanding or miscommunication, but a deliberate, calculated lie designed to extract $35,000 from my inheritance. The afternoon passed in a blur of client meetings and conference calls, but my mind kept returning to Dr. Whitmore's words. If Mom had lied about this emergency, what about the previous procedures? I made a mental note to start calling the other doctors who had supposedly treated Emma's various complications and accidents. That evening, I drove to Mom's house in Bellevue, a modest 2-story colonial that she'd purchased after Dad's death 3 years ago. The house always smelled like vanilla candles and fresh flowers, carefully maintained to project an image of comfortable middle-class stability. Mom worked as a part-time real estate agent, earning enough to cover her basic expenses but nothing approaching the lifestyle she'd enjoyed during her marriage to Dad. Emma was curled up on the living room couch, wrapped in a cashmere throw that I recognized as being well beyond Mom's usual budget. Her face looked perfectly normal aside from some minor swelling around her nose, nothing like the severe complications Mom had described. "Hey Vic," Emma said, looking up from her phone with a bright smile. "Mom said you're covering my revision surgery. You're the best big sister ever." Revision surgery. I sat down in the armchair across from her, studying her face carefully. "Emma, what exactly is wrong with your nose?" She touched the bandage gently. "Dr. Whitmore says there might be some irregularities in the cartilage structure. Nothing major, but he wants to perfect the shape before the final healing sets in. Mom thinks it's better to be safe than sorry, especially with my modeling portfolio update coming up." The casual way she discussed unnecessary cosmetic surgery as if it were routine medical care made my stomach churn. Has Dr. Whitmore actually recommended this revision surgery, or is this something Mom suggested? Emma's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. "Well, Mom spoke with him about it. She knows more about these medical things than I do. She just wants what's best for me." I spent the next hour making small talk with Emma and Mom, observing their interactions and looking for signs of the financial desperation that might explain Mom's deception. The house was well maintained, filled with fresh flowers and expensive-looking decorative items. Mom wore a new designer sweater that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. After Emma went upstairs to rest, I found myself alone with Mom in the kitchen. She moved around the space with practiced efficiency, preparing herbal tea and arranging imported cookies on a delicate china plate. "I spoke with Dr. Whitmore today," I said casually, watching for her reaction. Mom's hand paused almost imperceptibly as she reached for the sugar bowl. "Oh, I hope he explained the urgency of Emma's situation. These cartilage issues can become quite serious if left untreated. Actually, he said Emma is healing perfectly and doesn't need any additional surgery." The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken tension. Mom set down the sugar bowl with deliberate care, her expression shifting from maternal concern to something harder to read. "Doctors don't always communicate clearly with family members," she said finally. "Perhaps he was trying to spare you from worry about the technical details. These medical situations can be very complex. Her explanation sounded reasonable enough, but something in her tone suggested she was scrambling for a response. I decided to test her further. I think I should speak with Emma's other doctors as well, I said, just to make sure I understand the full scope of her medical history. Dr. Martinez, who did her tummy tuck, Dr. Peterson for the breast revision. I want to ensure we're providing proper care. Mom's face went completely pale, as if all the blood had drained from her features. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles white with tension. Victoria, I don't think that's necessary. These doctors are very busy, and we don't want to bother them with administrative questions. Besides, Emma's medical privacy should be respected. But I was already pulling out my phone, scrolling through my contact list where I'd saved the information from Emma's previous medical bills. It won't take long. I just want to verify the details for insurance purposes. The look of pure panic that crossed Mom's face told me everything I needed to know. She lunged forward, reaching for my phone with desperate urgency. Please, Victoria, don't call them tonight. Emma's been through so much stress already. Can't we discuss this as a family first? I pulled my phone back, studying Mom's face with new understanding. The perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the fear in her eyes, the tremor in her hands that she was trying desperately to control. Mom, what's really going on here? Why don't you want me to speak with Emma's doctors? She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. For a moment, she looked every one of her 53 years, the weight of whatever secret she'd been carrying evident in the lines around her eyes and the slump of her shoulders. It's complicated, sweetheart. Family finances, Emma's future, your inheritance, there are things you don't understand about our situation. Then help me understand, I said, sitting down across from her. Because right now, it looks like you've been lying to me about Emma's medical needs to access money that isn't yours. Mom's hands twisted in her lap, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood, whenever she was struggling with a difficult truth. Your grandmother's inheritance was meant for the whole family, not just you. Emma has dreams, aspirations that require investment. The modeling industry is incredibly competitive, and without the right look, the right procedures.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
So you decided to steal from my trust fund to pay for Emma's elective cosmetic surgery. The harsh words hung between us like a physical barrier. Mom flinched as if I'd slapped her, but she didn't deny the accusation. It's not stealing when it's family, she said quietly. Everything I've done has been to secure better futures for both my daughters. Emma's modeling career could support all of us. Your consulting job is stable, but Emma has the potential for real wealth, real success. I stared at her in disbelief. You've spent over $100,000 of my inheritance on unnecessary plastic surgery for Emma, and you think that's justified because she might become a successful model. The procedures weren't unnecessary, Mom protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Emma needed confidence, needed to correct certain imperfections that were holding her back professionally. Imperfections that didn't exist, I countered. Emma has always been beautiful. This is about your own insecurities, your own desire to live vicariously through her appearance. Mom stood up abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking her carefully manicured backyard. You don't understand the pressure Emma faces in her industry. Every casting call, every audition, she's competing against girls who've had professional work done. We had to level the playing field. With my money, I said flatly. Money that was left specifically to me by Grandma Catherine because she trusted me to use it wisely. Your grandmother would have wanted to help Emma too, Mom said, turning back to face me with renewed conviction. She loved both of you equally. If that were true, she would have split the inheritance between us. But she didn't, Mom. She left it to me with you as co-signer because she trusted you to help me protect it. The conversation was interrupted by Emma's voice calling from upstairs, asking if we had any of her prescription pain medication. Mom hurried away to check on her, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my churning thoughts and growing anger. I used the opportunity to examine the stack of mail on Mom's kitchen counter, looking for any additional clues about her financial situation. Hidden beneath grocery store circulars and credit card offers, I found a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. The balance showed over $60,000, with recent deposits that corresponded exactly to the dates of Emma's supposed medical emergencies. My heart sank as I realized Mom had been skimming money from the family account and depositing it into her personal savings. This wasn't just about paying for Emma's surgery. Mom was systematically stealing from my inheritance and building her own nest egg in the process. When she returned to the kitchen, I was holding the bank statement with trembling hands. "Explain this," I said, my voice barely controlled. Mom's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, defiance, and finally resignation. She sat back down heavily, as if the weight of her deception had finally become too much to bear. "I needed security," she said quietly. "Your father's death left me with very little. Social Security and my part-time real estate income barely cover my expenses. I saw an opportunity to help Emma while also preparing for my own future. By stealing from your daughter's inheritance," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Mom, do you understand what you've done? You've betrayed my trust, lied to me repeatedly, and stolen money that was meant to secure my future." "I was going to pay it back," she said desperately. "Once Emma's modeling career takes off, once she starts earning real money, I plan to return everything with interest. And if her modeling career doesn't take off, if all this surgery was for nothing, then what happens to my inheritance?" Mom had no answer for that. She sat in silence, staring at her hands while I processed the full magnitude of her betrayal. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate response to a genuine emergency. This was a calculated, ongoing scheme to redirect my inheritance toward Emma's vanity and Mom's personal financial security. I stood up, gathering my purse and jacket with mechanical precision. "I'm going to call the bank tomorrow morning and remove you as co-signer on the family account. Any remaining funds will be transferred to an account that only I can access." "Victoria, please," Mom said, reaching for my arm. "We can work this out as a family. Emma doesn't know about any of this. She thinks her procedures are medically necessary. If you cut off the funding now, how do I explain that to her?" "You tell her the truth," I said, pulling away from her grasp. "You tell her that you've been stealing money to pay for unnecessary cosmetic surgery and that it stops now. She'll be devastated," Mom whispered. "Her self-esteem, her career dreams. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to build her self-esteem on stolen money and lies." I left Mom's house that night feeling like I was walking away from my entire family. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur of streetlights and conflicted emotions. Part of me felt guilty for cutting off funding that Emma believed she needed for legitimate medical reasons. But a larger part of me was furious at being manipulated and betrayed by the people I trusted most. The next morning, I called my bank and scheduled an appointment to discuss removing Mom as co-signer from the family account. The banker, a middle-aged woman named Sandra who had helped me manage the account for years, listened to my explanation with professional sympathy. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this family situation," she said, as we reviewed the account statements together. "Unfortunately, financial abuse by family members is more common than people realize. The good news is that as the primary account holder, you have the authority to remove your mother's access immediately." As Sandra processed the paperwork, I found myself thinking about all the times Mom had praised my financial responsibility and maturity. She'd often told friends and family members how proud she was of my success, how smart I was with money. Now I realized those compliments had been strategic, designed to maintain my trust while she systematically depleted the account behind my back. "There's something else you should know," Sandra said, pulling up additional screens on her computer. "Your mother has been making inquiries about your other investments and retirement accounts. Nothing that would give her access, but she's been asking questions about your portfolio performance and future inheritance prospects." A chill ran down my spine as I realized Mom's scheme might be even more extensive than I'd discovered. "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know about your 401k balance, whether you had any other trust funds or inheritance expectations, and when you might be eligible to access certain restricted accounts. I told her I couldn't discuss your private financial information, but she seemed very interested in your overall financial picture." The implication was clear. Mom had been evaluating my entire financial situation to determine how much money she could potentially access through continued manipulation. This wasn't just about Emma's surgery. Mom was treating me like a long-term financial resource to be carefully managed and exploited. After leaving the bank, I drove aimlessly through the city, trying to process the full scope of my mother's betrayal. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the cemetery where Dad was buried, drawn to his gravesite for reasons I couldn't entirely explain. Dad's headstone was simple gray granite with his name, dates, and a line from his favorite poem about love enduring beyond death. I sat on the small bench nearby, remembering how he'd always encouraged my academic and professional ambitions. He'd been so proud when I graduated summa cum laude, when I landed my first consulting job, when I'd grown Grandma Catherine's modest inheritance into a substantial investment portfolio. "I wish you were here to tell me what to do," I said aloud, feeling foolish but needing to voice the words anyway. "Mom's stealing from me, and Emma doesn't even know she's part of the scheme. How do I protect myself without destroying what's left of our family?" The answer came not from any supernatural source, but from my own understanding of Dad's character and values. He'd always believed in honesty, even when it was difficult. He'd taught me to stand up for myself, to protect what was rightfully mine, and to hold people accountable for their actions regardless of family relationships. That evening, I called Emma directly, asking her to meet me for coffee the next day. I needed to find out how much she knew about Mom's financial manipulation, and whether she was a willing participant or an unwitting victim. We met at a small cafe near Emma's apartment, a trendy space filled with aspiring actors and models like herself. Emma looked stunning as always, her recent rhinoplasty enhancing features that had already been near perfect. She wore expensive clothes and carried a designer handbag that I now realized had probably been purchased with my stolen inheritance money. "I'm worried about Mom," I said, after we'd ordered our drinks. "She seems to be under a lot of financial stress lately." Emma's brow furrowed with genuine concern. "Really? She always seems so put together. Her house is beautiful, she drives that nice car, always has fresh flowers and fancy groceries. How do you think she affords all that on a part-time real estate salary?" The question seemed to genuinely puzzle Emma. I assumed she was doing well with her clients. She's always talking about big sales and successful closings. Plus, didn't Dad leave her with some savings? I studied Emma's face carefully, looking for signs of deception or hidden knowledge. But her confusion appeared entirely genuine. She really believed Mom was financially successful through her own work, with no understanding of where the money for her surgeries had actually come from. "Emma, do you know where the money for your medical procedures has been coming from?" She looked surprised by the question. "From Mom's medical insurance, I think, plus some savings she set aside for family emergencies. She said Dad would have wanted her to take care of any health issues we might have." The lies were even more extensive than I'd realized. Mom had created an entire fictional narrative about insurance coverage and emergency savings to explain the source of funds for Emma's unnecessary procedures. "There's something you need to know about those procedures," I said gently. "The money hasn't been coming from insurance or Mom's savings. It's been coming from my inheritance, and the surgeries haven't been medically necessary." Emma's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally horror, as the implications sank in. "What do you mean, not medically necessary?" "Dr. Whitmore said I needed the revision work." Mom explained all the complications. I spent the next hour carefully explaining what I'd discovered. The lies about medical emergencies, the theft from my trust fund, Mom's personal savings account, and the doctor's actual statements about Emma's unnecessary procedures. With each revelation, Emma seemed to shrink further into herself. "I never wanted to take money from you," she said finally, tears streaming down her face. "Vic, I had no idea." Mom made it sound like everything was covered, like it was all perfectly normal and safe. "I know," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I don't think you're responsible for Mom's lies. But I need to know, are you willing to help me figure out how extensive this scheme really is?" Emma nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" Over the following days, Emma and I worked together to uncover the full scope of Mom's financial manipulation. Emma searched through Mom's house while she was at work, looking for additional bank statements, medical documents, or evidence of other schemes. I continued calling the doctors who had supposedly treated Emma, confirming that most of the emergency procedures had been elective cosmetic work requested and paid for by Mom. The picture that emerged was even more disturbing than I'd initially suspected. Mom had been planning this scheme for over a year, carefully researching cosmetic procedures and doctors, and developing a systematic approach to extracting money from my inheritance account. We found detailed notes in Mom's handwriting about Emma's treatment plan, listing potential procedures and their costs, along with fabricated medical justifications for each surgery. She'd even researched which doctors would be most willing to perform elective procedures without asking too many questions about medical necessity. But the most shocking discovery came when Emma found a folder hidden behind Mom's bedroom dresser. Inside were documents related to additional trust funds and investments that I didn't even know existed, left to me by various family members over the years. Mom had been intercepting and redirecting these inheritances for months, building a substantial secret portfolio that I'd never even known about. "Victoria," Emma said, calling me from Mom's house with trembling voice. "You need to see this. There's way more money involved than we thought." I drove to Mom's house immediately, finding Emma sitting in the living room surrounded by papers and documents. The scope of Mom's deception was breathtaking. She'd been systematically intercepting my mail, forging my signature on documents, and redirecting inheritance funds into accounts that she controlled. "She's stolen almost $400,000, Emma said quietly. "Not just from Grandma Catherine's trust, but from Great Aunt Helen's estate, Grandpa Joe's life insurance policy, and 2 smaller inheritances from Dad's side of the family." I sank onto the couch beside Emma, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Mom's betrayal. This wasn't opportunistic theft or a temporary lapse in judgment. This was systematic, long-term financial fraud that had been going on for years. "There's more," Emma continued, handing me a legal document. "She's been forging your signature on investment account changes, moving money into high-risk ventures that she controls. If these investments fail, you could lose everything." As I reviewed the documents, I realized that confronting Mom about Emma's surgery money had only scratched the surface of a much larger criminal enterprise. She'd been treating my financial life like her personal piggy bank, stealing not just money, but my entire financial future. The sound of Mom's car in the driveway interrupted our discovery session. Emma and I quickly gathered the most incriminating documents and hid them in my purse, then arranged ourselves casually in the living room, as if we'd just been having a normal sisterly visit. Mom entered with her usual bright smile and arms full of shopping bags from expensive stores. She kissed Emma's forehead and squeezed my shoulder affectionately, playing the role of loving mother while continuing her systematic theft of my inheritance. "How are my beautiful daughters?" she asked, settling into her favorite armchair. "Emma, how are you feeling after yesterday's follow-up appointment?" I watched Emma struggle to maintain normal conversation while knowing the truth about Mom's deception. The casual way Mom continued lying, even after our confrontation about the surgery money, demonstrated a level of callousness that I was still struggling to comprehend. "Actually, Mom," I said carefully, "I've been thinking more about our conversation the other night. I'd like to understand the family financial situation better. Maybe you could show me some of the accounts and investments you've been managing?" Mom's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composed facade. "Of course, sweetheart, though I'm not sure there's much to review. Your inheritance accounts are quite straightforward. I'm particularly interested in any other family money that might have come through over the years. Sometimes these things get complicated with multiple accounts and beneficiaries." The silence that followed felt charged with unspoken tension. Mom's eyes darted between Emma and me, as if she was trying to calculate how much we might know and what her best response should be. "I think you might be overcomplicating things," she said finally. "Your grandmother's trust is really the only significant inheritance you've received. Everything else has been quite minor." The boldness of her continued lying, even in the face of my direct questions, confirmed that Mom had no intention of voluntarily coming clean about the full scope of her theft. She was prepared to maintain her deception indefinitely, continuing to steal from me while playing the role of concerned mother. As I drove home that night, I realized that my relationship with my mother was fundamentally over. The woman who had raised me, taught me right from wrong, and claimed to love me unconditionally, had been systematically stealing my financial future while lying to my face about it. The path forward was clear. I needed to contact a lawyer immediately and begin the process of recovering my stolen inheritance. But I also needed to prepare myself for the reality that pursuing justice would likely mean destroying what remained of my family relationships and potentially seeing my own mother face criminal charges for fraud and theft. The choice between family loyalty and financial survival wasn't really a choice at all. Mom had made her decision when she chose to steal from me. Now I had to make mine. The law office of Harrison and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown skyscraper, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Elliott Bay. I sat across from attorney Margaret Harrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, whose reputation for handling complex financial fraud cases had come highly recommended by my firm's legal department. Margaret spread the documents Emma and I had discovered across her mahogany conference table, studying each piece of evidence with the methodical precision of someone who had seen too many families destroyed by greed and deception. "This is extensive," she said finally, removing her reading glasses and fixing me with a direct stare. "Your mother has committed multiple felonies here. Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and what appears to be organized money laundering through these shell investment accounts." I shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair, still struggling to reconcile the criminal behavior Margaret described with the woman who had packed my school lunches and attended every soccer game throughout my childhood. "What are my options for recovery?" I asked, focusing on practical matters rather than the emotional devastation of my mother's betrayal. "We can pursue both civil and criminal charges," Margaret explained, pulling out a legal pad to take notes. "The civil case would focus on recovering your stolen assets, while criminal charges would hold your mother accountable under federal fraud statutes. Given the amount involved and the interstate banking components, this could result in significant prison time." The words prison time hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything Mom had done, the thought of her behind bars made my stomach churn with guilt and grief. "Is there any way to recover the money without involving criminal prosecution?" I asked. Margaret's expression softened slightly. "I understand this is your mother, Victoria, but you need to understand the scope of what she's done. This isn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate response to financial pressure. She's been running a sophisticated fraud operation for years, with clear intent to permanently deprive you of your inheritance." She pulled out a financial analysis prepared by her firm's forensic accountant. "Based on the investment redirections we've uncovered, your mother has been actively gambling with your money in high-risk ventures. Some of these investments have already failed completely. Even if we recover everything she hasn't spent, you're looking at losses of at least $60,000. The number felt abstract, divorced from the reality of what it represented. $60,000 was a year's worth of student loan payments, a down payment on a house, or seed money for the consulting practice I'd been dreaming of starting. It was my future systematically dismantled by the person who claimed to love me most. "There's something else," Margaret continued, her tone becoming more grave. "The pattern of financial manipulation suggests your mother may have been planning something even more extensive. Some of these investment accounts have provisions that would transfer full control to her in the event of your death or incapacitation." A chill ran through me as I processed the implications. "You're saying she was planning to have me declared incompetent or something?" "I'm saying the financial structure she's created would benefit significantly from your inability to manage your own affairs," Margaret said carefully. "Whether that was her intent or simply a convenient side effect, I can't determine without further investigation." I left Margaret's office with a folder full of legal documents and a timeline for beginning formal proceedings against Mom. The elevator ride down 32 floors felt like a descent into a parallel universe where my loving family had been replaced by calculating strangers with criminal intentions. Emma was waiting for me at a coffee shop across the street, her face anxious and drawn. She'd spent the morning at Mom's house, ostensibly helping with household tasks, while actually searching for additional evidence of financial fraud. "How did it go?" she asked as I slumped into the chair across from her. "The lawyer thinks Mom could face federal prison time," I said quietly. "Emma, this is so much worse than we initially thought. She's not just stealing money for your surgeries, she's been running a full-scale financial fraud operation." Emma's face went pale. "I found more stuff today," she said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Mom has been intercepting your mail for over 2 years. Credit reports, investment statements, inheritance notifications from relatives I didn't even know had died. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, finding copies of documents that should have been delivered directly to me. Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of, notifications of inheritance distributions I'd never received, and investment reports showing significant losses in portfolios I didn't know existed. There's a whole filing system in her home office. Emma continued. She's been tracking your financial information like a business enterprise. Birth certificates, social security records, even copies of your college transcripts and employment contracts. The systematic nature of Mom's deception was becoming clearer with each revelation. This wasn't opportunistic theft but a carefully planned long-term strategy to assume control over my financial life. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, I said, meeting her eyes across the table. How long have you known that something was wrong with Mom's explanations about money? Emma looked down at her hands, clearly struggling with the question. I started having doubts about 6 months ago, she admitted. The medical bills never seemed to match what she was telling me about insurance coverage. And some of the procedures, I knew they weren't really necessary, but Mom made them sound so important for my career. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted them. Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. I knew the surgeries weren't medically necessary, but I wanted to look perfect. Mom made it seem like we could afford it, like it was just smart investment in my future. I didn't ask too many questions because I was afraid she'd change her mind. The honesty of Emma's admission hit me harder than any of Mom's lies. My sister had participated in spending my inheritance, even if she hadn't understood the source of the money. Her vanity and ambition had made her complicit in Mom's fraud, regardless of her intentions. I want to pay you back, Emma said urgently. Every penny. I'll get a job, work extra hours, sell everything I own if I have to. Vic, I never meant for this to happen. I studied my sister's face, seeing genuine remorse, mixed with fear about her uncertain future. Emma had been manipulated by Mom, but she was also old enough to have asked harder questions about the sudden availability of funds for expensive elective surgery. We'll figure out the repayment later, I said finally. Right now I need to decide whether to pursue criminal charges against Mom. The lawyer says it's the best way to recover the money, but it would mean Mom goes to prison. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She's our mother, Vic. I know what she did was wrong, but prison. That seems so extreme. $400,000, Emma. She stole $400,000 from me while lying to my face about it for years. How is prison extreme for that level of theft? The question hung between us, highlighting the impossible position Mom's actions had created. Family loyalty demanded forgiveness and protection, but justice required accountability and consequences. There was no middle ground that satisfied both obligations. My phone buzzed with a text message from Mom. Girls, I'm making dinner tonight. Your favorite lasagna, Emma. Victoria, I'd love to discuss our family financial planning. Can you both come by around 6? The casual tone of the message, as if nothing had changed between us, demonstrated Mom's complete disconnection from the reality of her situation. She was still playing the role of loving mother while continuing to manipulate and deceive. She wants us both for dinner tonight, I told Emma, showing her the message. Emma read it with growing alarm. She doesn't know we found everything, does she? What if she suspects we've been investigating her? The question raised unsettling possibilities. If Mom realized the full extent of our knowledge, what would she do to protect herself? The woman who had systematically stolen my inheritance for years was clearly capable of calculated deception. What other measures might she take to avoid consequences? We should go, I decided, but we need to be careful. No more searching through her papers, no direct confrontations. I want to see how she behaves when she thinks she still has control of the situation. That evening, Emma and I arrived at Mom's house together, both of us struggling to act normally, while knowing the truth about her extensive fraud. Mom greeted us with her usual warmth, wearing a new silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. The dining room table was set with Mom's best china and crystal glasses, as if this were a special celebration rather than a routine family dinner. Fresh flowers dominated the centerpiece, and classical music played softly in the background. "I'm so glad we could all be together tonight," Mom said as she served generous portions of homemade lasagna. "Family dinner is so important, especially when we're dealing with complex decisions about Emma's medical care and Victoria's financial planning." The casual way she mentioned my financial planning made my skin crawl. She was sitting across from me, discussing managing my money, while having stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from my inheritance accounts. "What kind of financial planning did you want to discuss?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mom's eyes lit up with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "Well, I've been researching some excellent investment opportunities that could really grow your inheritance portfolio. There's a real estate development project in Costa Rica that's offering guaranteed returns of 12% annually." Emma and I exchanged a quick glance. Mom was actively trying to convince me to invest more money in what was almost certainly another fraudulent scheme designed to give her access to additional funds. 12% guaranteed returns.
I repeated. That seems unusually high for a legitimate investment. It's a special opportunity, Mom explained, pulling out a glossy brochure featuring tropical beaches and luxury condominiums. The developer is offering limited partnerships to select investors. I know someone in the industry who can get us priority access. The brochure looked professional enough, but Margaret Harrison's warnings about Mom's high-risk investment schemes echoed in my mind. This was probably another vehicle for stealing my money while maintaining the pretense of financial management. "I'd want to review all the legal documentation before committing to anything," I said carefully. Mom's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, sweetheart. Though opportunities like this don't stay available for long, sometimes we have to trust our instincts and move quickly on good investments." The pressure tactics were becoming obvious now that I knew what to look for. Mom was trying to rush me into another financial decision without proper due diligence, just as she'd done with Emma's supposed medical emergencies. "Speaking of Emma's medical care," I continued, "I've been thinking we should get a second opinion about her upcoming procedure. Maybe consult with another specialist to confirm Dr. Whitmore's recommendations." Mom's reaction was immediate and telling. Her fork clattered against her plate, and she fixed me with a sharp stare that contained more warning than maternal concern. "I don't think that's necessary," she said firmly. "Dr. Whitmore is one of the best surgeons on the West Coast. Getting multiple opinions would just confuse the situation and delay Emma's treatment. But wouldn't it be good to have confirmation that the surgery is really necessary?" Emma asked, playing her part in our careful investigation. Mom turned her attention to Emma with a look that bordered on intimidation. "Darling, you trust me to know what's best for your health, don't you? I've researched all of this extensively. Dr. Whitmore has explained the risks of delaying treatment." The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Mom was simultaneously pressuring Emma to undergo unnecessary surgery while trying to convince me to invest in fraudulent schemes, all while maintaining the facade of concerned maternal guidance. After dinner, Mom insisted on showing me her home office, ostensibly to review some of the investment documents she'd mentioned. The room was immaculately organized, with files labeled for different aspects of family financial management. "I've been keeping track of all your accounts and investment performance," she said, pulling out folders that contained detailed records of my financial information. "It's important to have comprehensive oversight of complex portfolios." The folders contained photocopies of documents I'd never given her permission to access, along with handwritten notes about investment strategies and financial projections. She'd been treating my inheritance like her personal business venture, complete with detailed planning and performance tracking. "This is very thorough," I said, flipping through pages of financial analysis. "How did you get access to all this information?" "Oh, you know how these things work," Mom said vaguely. "Banks and investment companies are happy to work with family members who are helping with financial management. Plus, I'm still listed as emergency contact on most of your accounts." The explanation was plausible enough to avoid immediate suspicion, but I now knew she'd been intercepting my mail and forging my signature to gain unauthorized access to my financial information. "I've also been thinking about Emma's long-term financial security," Mom continued, pulling out another folder. "The modeling industry can be unpredictable, so I want to make sure she has backup plans and investment income. Inside the folder were documents outlining a complex financial plan that would involve transferring portions of my inheritance into accounts designated for Emma's future security. The plan was presented as generous family financial planning, but I could see how it would effectively transfer my money to accounts that Mom could control. This seems like a significant commitment of my inheritance funds, I observed. Family takes care of family, Mom replied, using the same phrase she'd employed to justify stealing money for Emma's surgeries. Your grandmother would have wanted both her granddaughters to be financial. The conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from the living room, claiming she felt dizzy and needed to sit down. Mom hurried out to check on her, giving me a few precious minutes alone in the home office. I quickly photographed the most incriminating documents with my phone, focusing on the unauthorized financial records and the proposed investment schemes. The evidence would be crucial for Margaret Harrison's case against Mom. As I was finishing, I noticed a locked filing cabinet in the corner of the room. The lock was a simple residential model that I could probably pick with basic tools, but attempting it while Mom was in the house would be too risky. How is Emma feeling? I asked when I joined them in the living room. Just a little tired from all the medical stress, Mom explained, though Emma looked perfectly fine aside from some theatrical pale makeup she'd apparently applied while Mom wasn't looking. We left shortly afterward, with Mom extracting promises from both of us to think seriously about the investment opportunities and medical decisions she'd presented. In the car, Emma and I sat in silence for several minutes, processing what we'd experienced. She's completely delusional, Emma said finally. The way she talks about stealing your money like it's normal family financial planning, it's sociopathic. Did you notice how she reacted when I suggested getting a second medical opinion? I asked. She's not just stealing money for your surgeries, she's actively trying to ensure you have unnecessary procedures to justify continued theft. The realization was deeply disturbing. Mom wasn't just taking advantage of Emma's vanity, she was actively encouraging medical procedures that weren't needed to maintain her cover story for financial fraud. I want to help you get her arrested, Emma said quietly. Whatever it takes to stop this and get your money back. She's not the mother we thought she was. The next morning, I met with Margaret Harrison again to review the new evidence I'd gathered during dinner at Mom's house. The photos of unauthorized financial documents and the proposed investment schemes strengthened the case significantly. Your mother is actively trying to expand her fraud operation, Margaret observed after reviewing the images. These Costa Rica real estate investments are classic money laundering schemes. She's not just stealing your existing money, she's trying to get you to voluntarily hand over additional funds. What's our next step? I asked. We file a formal complaint with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and begin civil recovery proceedings immediately, Margaret said. Given the interstate banking components and the sophisticated nature of the fraud, this falls under federal jurisdiction. The thought of federal agents investigating my mother felt surreal, but I knew it was necessary to recover my stolen inheritance and prevent further theft. There's one more thing, Margaret continued. Based on the financial documents you've shown me, I believe your mother has been planning this fraud for much longer than we initially suspected. Some of these investment redirections date back to shortly after your father's death. The timeline was deeply troubling. Mom had begun stealing from me while I was still grieving Dad's loss, using my emotional vulnerability to establish financial controls that she could later exploit. That afternoon, FBI agents Rachel Torres and David Kim met me at Margaret Harrison's office to begin formal documentation of Mom's fraud. Agent Torres was a specialist in financial crimes, while Agent Kim focused on family-related fraud cases. Family financial fraud is unfortunately common, Agent Torres explained as she reviewed the evidence. Parents and relatives often feel entitled to younger family members' assets, especially inheritance money. The emotional manipulation makes victims reluctant to report the crimes. Agent Kim was particularly interested in the systematic nature of Mom's deception. The level of planning and documentation suggests this is a career criminal rather than an opportunistic family member. Has your mother ever been involved in financial crimes before? I realized I had no idea about Mom's financial history before her marriage to Dad. She'd always been vague about her background, claiming her family records had been lost in various moves and divorces. We'll run a comprehensive background check, Agent Kim assured me. If your mother has done this before, there will be records. The investigation would take several weeks to complete, during which time I would need to continue interacting with Mom as if nothing had changed. The agents wanted to gather additional evidence of her ongoing fraud attempts before making an arrest. Can you handle maintaining normal family relationships while we build the case? Agent Torres asked. The question highlighted the emotional torture of my situation. I would have to continue having dinner with Mom, listening to her lies about Emma's medical needs and investment opportunities, all while knowing she was actively stealing my financial future. I can handle it, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. Over the following weeks, I became an undercover investigator in my own family. Every conversation with Mom was carefully recorded with FBI equipment. Every financial document she showed me was photographed and forwarded to the federal investigators. The most difficult part was watching Emma struggle with her role in the deception. She'd begun refusing all medical procedures, telling Mom she wanted to take a break from cosmetic enhancement to focus on her modeling portfolio. Mom's reaction was telling. She became increasingly agitated about Emma's decision, pressuring her to continue with scheduled procedures that were supposedly medically necessary. If you don't complete the treatment series, you could have permanent scarring, Mom warned during one particularly tense family dinner. Dr. Whitmore has specifically designed a comprehensive plan to ensure optimal healing. I feel fine, Emma insisted. Maybe we should wait and see how everything heals naturally before scheduling more surgery. Mom's mask of maternal concern slipped slightly, revealing the calculating frustration underneath. Emma, we've already committed to this treatment plan. It's not something you can just stop in the middle. The pressure tactics became more aggressive, as Mom realized her justification for continued theft was disappearing. Without Emma's supposed medical emergencies, she would need to find new ways to access my inheritance money. Sure enough, within days of Emma's refusal to continue with unnecessary procedures, Mom began presenting new financial emergencies that required immediate access to my accounts. Her house needed urgent foundation repairs. Her car required expensive engine work. She'd been offered an exclusive investment opportunity that required quick action. Each request was accompanied by documentation that looked legitimate but fell apart under closer scrutiny. The foundation repair estimate was from a company that didn't exist. The car repair invoice was dated in the future. The investment opportunity was promoted by firms with no official business registrations. Mom's desperation was becoming more obvious as the FBI investigation continued. She built her lifestyle around steady access to my inheritance money, and without that income stream, her carefully maintained facade was beginning to crumble. The end came on a Tuesday morning, when FBI agents arrested Mom at her house while she was meeting with another potential victim, an elderly neighbor whom she'd been pressuring to invest in the same fraudulent Costa Rica real estate scheme. I wasn't present for the arrest, but Emma called me in tears, after watching from across the street as Mom was led away in handcuffs. The sight of our mother being treated like a common criminal was devastating, even though we both knew her actions had been criminal. She kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding. Emma sobbed over the phone. Even with the FBI agents reading her rights, she was claiming she was just helping manage family finances. Mom's inability to acknowledge the reality of her crimes, even when confronted with federal arrest, demonstrated the depth of her self-deception. She genuinely seemed to believe she'd been acting in the family's best interests, rather than committing systematic fraud. The media attention that followed was mercifully brief but intensely uncomfortable. Local news stations ran stories about the inheritance fraud mother, who had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from her own daughter. Mom's real estate clients were interviewed about whether they'd suspected anything unusual about her financial situation. Through it all, I tried to focus on the practical aspects of recovery, rather than the emotional devastation of losing my mother to criminal behavior. Margaret Harrison worked with federal prosecutors to ensure maximum restitution as part of any plea agreement. Your mother's assets will be seized and liquidated to repay what she stole, Margaret explained. The house, the car, the investment accounts she established with your money, everything will be recovered and returned to you. The financial recovery was important, but it couldn't restore the family relationships that Mom's actions had destroyed. Emma and I were closer than we'd ever been, united by our shared trauma and determination to rebuild our lives. But the mother we'd loved and trusted was gone, replaced by the reality of who she'd actually been all along. As I sat in Margaret Harrison's office signing the final recovery documents, I reflected on the lessons learned from Mom's betrayal. Trust, once broken by financial manipulation, was nearly impossible to restore. Family relationships built on lies and theft couldn't survive the revelation of truth. But perhaps most importantly, I'd learned that protecting myself and my future sometimes required making painful choices about the people I loved. Mom had forced me to choose between enabling her criminal behavior and seeking justice for her victims. The choice hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. The inheritance money would eventually be returned, minus the amounts Mom had already spent and lost through bad investments. My financial future was secure, even if my family relationships had been permanently altered. Some prices, I realized, were simply too high to pay for the illusion of family harmony. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as Judge Patricia Hoffman called the proceedings to order. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, watching my mother enter in an Orange County jail jumpsuit, her usually perfect hair now limp and unkempt, after 3 months in custody awaiting trial.
Mom's eyes found mine across the courtroom, and for a moment, her mask of defiance slipped to reveal something that might have been regret. But then her lawyer whispered something in her ear, and she straightened her shoulders, returning to the cold composure she'd maintained since her arrest. The federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Nguyen, stood to address the jury with opening statements that laid out the scope of Mom's financial crimes in stark detail. She described a sophisticated fraud operation that had systematically drained multiple inheritance accounts over a period of 3 years, using forged documents and identity theft to steal nearly $400,000. "Ladies and gentlemen," Prosecutor Nguyen said, gesturing toward the evidence table loaded with bank records and forged documents, "this case is about a mother who viewed her own daughter not as a child to protect and nurture, but as a financial resource to be exploited for personal gain." Mom's defense attorney, Robert Chen, presented a different narrative in his opening statement. He painted Mom as a devoted mother who had made questionable financial decisions while trying to help her daughters succeed, portraying the fraud as misguided family financial planning rather than criminal intent. "Margaret Winters is guilty of poor judgment and financial mismanagement," Chen argued, "but she is not a criminal mastermind motivated by greed. Every dollar she accessed was used to benefit her daughters' futures, even if her methods were legally problematic." The distinction felt meaningless to me. Whether Mom had stolen my money out of greed or misguided maternal instincts, the result was the same years of systematic theft that had jeopardized my financial security and destroyed my ability to trust the people closest to me. Emma testified on the second day of trial, her voice barely above a whisper as she described how Mom had convinced her that expensive cosmetic procedures were medically necessary and fully covered by insurance. The defense attorney tried to portray Emma as a willing participant in the fraud, but her genuine confusion and remorse were evident to everyone in the courtroom. "I never asked where the money was coming from," Emma admitted during cross-examination. "My mother told me everything was taken care of, and I believed her because she was my mother. I trusted her completely." When my turn came to testify, I found myself face to face with Mom for the first time since her arrest. She watched me with an expression I couldn't decipher, something between disappointment and calculation, as if she was still trying to figure out how to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Prosecutor Nguyen walked me through the timeline of discovering Mom's fraud, from the initial lie about Emma's surgery complications to the revelation of the extensive financial theft. I described finding the hidden bank statements, the forged investment documents, and the systematic interception of my mail over multiple years. "Miss Chen," Prosecutor Nguyen said, "in your opinion, was your mother's theft of your inheritance motivated by desperation or by calculated greed?" Defense attorney Chen objected before I could answer, but the question highlighted the central issue of the trial. Mom hadn't stolen from me during a moment of financial crisis or family emergency. She'd built an entire criminal enterprise around accessing my money while maintaining the facade of concerned motherhood. During cross-examination, Chen tried to portray me as vindictive and money-obsessed, suggesting that I was prosecuting my own mother over what amounted to family financial disputes.
He emphasized the fact that Emma had benefited from the stolen money, implying that the theft had been motivated by maternal love rather than personal greed. "Isn't it true, Miss Chen, that your mother sacrificed her own financial security to ensure your sister received the medical care she needed?" Chen asked. "My sister didn't need medical care," I replied firmly. "She needed cosmetic surgery that my mother encouraged her to pursue, using money that didn't belong to either of them." The trial lasted 6 days, with testimony from FBI financial analysts, the doctors who had performed Emma's unnecessary procedures, and several other elderly victims whom Mom had targeted with the same fraudulent investment schemes she'd tried to sell me. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed systematic transfers from my accounts to accounts Mom controlled. Handwriting analysis confirmed she had forged my signature on multiple financial documents. Recorded conversations captured her attempting to manipulate additional victims with the same tactics she'd used on our family. Most damaging was testimony from Dr. Sarah Martinez, one of the plastic surgeons who had performed Emma's procedures. She confirmed that Mom had specifically requested cosmetic work rather than medical treatment, and had insisted on the most expensive options available while claiming that cost was no object because of excellent insurance coverage. Mrs. Winters was very particular about ensuring the procedures were costly and extensive, Dr. Martinez testified. She said she wanted the best for her daughter, and that money wasn't a concern because of family inheritance funds that were available for medical expenses. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. As the foreman read the verdicts, Mom's composed facade finally cracked. She began crying quietly, not the tears of someone who felt remorse for her actions, but the tears of someone who couldn't believe her carefully constructed world was collapsing. Judge Hoffman scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later, giving Mom's legal team time to prepare mitigation arguments and allowing the probation department to complete their presentencing report. During this waiting period, Mom made several attempts to contact me from jail, leaving voicemail messages that alternated between apologies and accusations. "Victoria, I know you're angry, but you have to understand that everything I did was for our family," she said in one message. "The modeling industry is so competitive, and Emma needed every advantage I could give her. Your inheritance was just sitting there not helping anyone." Other messages were less conciliatory. "You've destroyed your own mother over money," she said in one particularly bitter voicemail. "I gave you life, raised you, supported your education and career, and this is how you repay me. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become." The emotional manipulation continued even from jail, as Mom tried to guilt me into supporting a reduced sentence or somehow forgiving her criminal behavior. But the financial evidence had revealed the calculated nature of her theft, making it impossible to view her actions as misguided maternal love rather than systematic fraud. Emma and I spent those 6 weeks working with victim services coordinators and financial recovery specialists to begin rebuilding our lives. The federal government had seized all of Mom's assets, including her house, car, and the secret investment accounts she'd established with my stolen money. Some of the money was recoverable, but the high-risk investments Mom had made with my inheritance had resulted in significant losses. "You'll get back about 60% of what was stolen," Margaret Harrison explained during one of our recovery meetings. "The house sale will cover a significant portion, but the fraudulent investments your mother made have collapsed completely. Those funds are gone forever." The financial loss was devastating, but not crippling. I'd been earning good money in my consulting career, and the recovered inheritance would still provide a solid foundation for my future. More importantly, the criminal prosecution had ensured that Mom couldn't steal from me or anyone else in the future. Emma had used the weeks before sentencing to completely reshape her life. She'd gotten a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic, started attending community college classes in healthcare administration, and begun therapy to address her complicated relationship with self-image and family manipulation. "I don't want to be the kind of person who benefits from stolen money," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "Even if I didn't know where it was coming from, I should have asked more questions. I should have been suspicious when Mom suddenly had unlimited funds for expensive procedures. Emma had also volunteered to testify at Mom's sentencing hearing, not to request leniency, but to describe the impact of the fraud on our family relationships. She wanted the judge to understand that Mom's crimes had destroyed more than just financial security, they'd shattered the trust and love that had held our family together. The sentencing hearing took place on a cold January morning, with family members of Mom's other fraud victims filling the courtroom gallery. I'd been surprised to learn during the trial that Mom had targeted at least 6 other people with similar investment scams, stealing smaller amounts, but using the same tactics of emotional manipulation and false documentation. Judge Hoffman listened to victim impact statements for over an hour, hearing from elderly people who had lost retirement savings to Mom's fraudulent schemes, and from Emma and me about the destruction of our family relationships. The cumulative impact was sobering. Mom hadn't just committed financial crimes, but had systematically betrayed the trust of vulnerable people who had believed her lies. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Mom stood and addressed the court with what appeared to be genuine remorse for the first time since her arrest. "Your Honor, I know that what I did was wrong, and I take full responsibility for my actions," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never intended to hurt my daughters or the other people who trusted me. I made terrible decisions driven by what I thought was love and concern for my family's future." She turned to look directly at Emma and me. "Victoria, Emma, I know you may never forgive me, and I understand why. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. All I can say is that I love you both, and I hope someday you'll be able to remember the good times we shared before I destroyed everything." The apology felt both genuine and insufficient. While I appreciated Mom's acknowledgement of responsibility, it couldn't undo years of systematic theft and manipulation. The woman who had raised me was gone, replaced by the reality of who she'd actually been behind the mask of maternal love. Judge Hoffman sentenced Mom to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and an order to pay full restitution to all victims. The sentence was longer than her lawyer had hoped for, but shorter than the maximum penalty allowed under federal sentencing guidelines. "Mrs. Winters," Judge Hoffman said, as she imposed the sentence, "your crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust that extends far beyond simple theft. You manipulated your own daughters and vulnerable elderly victims, using their love and trust as weapons against them. This court cannot overlook the calculated nature of your fraud, or the devastating impact on your victims." As the bailiff led Mom away to begin serving her sentence, she looked back at Emma and me one final time. I couldn't read the expression on her face. Perhaps it was love, perhaps regret, perhaps just the recognition that she was facing the consequences of choices she'd made over years of systematic deception. The months following Mom's sentencing were a process of rebuilding and healing that proved more challenging than the investigation and trial had been. Emma and I had grown closer through our shared trauma, but we both struggled with guilt, anger, and grief over the loss of the mother we thought we'd known. Emma's therapy sessions helped her work through the complicated emotions of being both victim and unwitting beneficiary of Mom's crimes. She developed a healthier relationship with her self-image, focusing on achievements in school and work rather than pursuing the modeling career that had been built on stolen money and unnecessary surgery. I look in the mirror now and see myself instead of seeing all the things Mom convinced me needed to be fixed, Emma told me during one of our weekly sister dinners. "It's like waking up from a really long, expensive nightmare." My own healing process involved working with a therapist who specialized in family financial abuse. The sessions helped me understand that Mom's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth or judgment, but rather a calculated exploitation of normal family trust and love. Financial abuse by family members is particularly traumatic because it combines theft with emotional manipulation, my therapist explained. "Your mother didn't just steal money, she stole your sense of security and your ability to trust the people closest to you." The insurance money from Mom's house sale, combined with recovered assets from her fraudulent investment accounts, eventually restored about $250,000 of my stolen inheritance. While this was significantly less than the original amount, it was enough to provide financial security and fund the consulting practice I'd been planning to start. Emma insisted on contributing to the restitution despite her limited income, gradually paying me back for the cosmetic procedures she'd received with stolen money. I tried to tell her it wasn't necessary, but she was determined to take responsibility for her part in the fraud, even though she'd been manipulated into participation. I need to know that I earned my life honestly, she explained. As long as I'm living with the benefits of stolen money, I can't really move forward. 1 year after Mom's sentencing, Emma and I received a letter from her in federal prison. She'd been assigned to work in the prison library and was taking correspondence courses in accounting and business administration. The letter was carefully written, acknowledging her crimes without making excuses or requesting forgiveness she knew she didn't deserve. I spend every day thinking about the damage I caused to our family and to the other people I hurt, she wrote. I know that apologizing can't undo what I did, but I want you both to know that I recognize the full extent of my actions and their consequences. I stole more than money from you. I stole your trust and your sense of family security. The letter continued with updates about her prison routine and her efforts to prepare for eventual release and restitution payments. She'd been working with victim services coordinators to develop a realistic plan for paying back the money she'd stolen, though her earning potential after prison would be limited by her criminal record. I may never be able to fully repay what I took from you financially, Mom's letter concluded, but I'm committed to spending the rest of my life trying to make amends in whatever way possible. I understand if you don't want to maintain contact with me, but I hope that someday you'll be able to think of me as more than just the person who betrayed your trust. Emma and I discussed whether to respond to the letter, ultimately deciding to send a brief acknowledgement that we'd received it but weren't ready for ongoing communication. The wounds were still too fresh, the trust too thoroughly destroyed, for anything resembling a normal family relationship. 2 years after Mom's conviction, I was running my own successful consulting practice, specializing in financial fraud prevention and family business governance. The irony wasn't lost on me that my expertise in detecting financial manipulation had grown directly from my experience as a victim of family fraud. Emma had completed her community college degree and was working as a medical office manager while pursuing a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration. She'd found purpose in helping patients navigate medical billing and insurance issues, using her experience with fraudulent medical claims to spot potential problems for legitimate patients. We still had dinner together every week, a tradition that had become more meaningful after losing our family's center through Mom's criminal actions. Our conversations had evolved from processing trauma to planning futures, though we both remained cautious about trusting new people with our financial or emotional security. Do you think we'll ever feel normal about family relationships again? Emma asked during one of our dinners, a question that had become a recurring theme in our conversations. I think we'll feel different about them, I replied, more careful, maybe more aware of the potential for manipulation. But that's not necessarily bad. We'll just be harder to fool in the future. The stolen inheritance money had been replaced through insurance recovery and Mom's asset seizure, but the stolen sense of family security could never be fully restored. Emma and I had learned to create our own definition of family, built on honesty, mutual support, and the shared understanding that love doesn't justify theft or manipulation. On the 3rd anniversary of discovering Mom's fraud, I visited her grave at the cemetery where Dad was buried. She died of a heart attack during her 4th year in prison, alone and largely unmourned except by the daughters whose trust she'd destroyed, and the life she'd built on lies. Standing at her gravestone, I felt a complicated mix of grief, anger, and relief. Grief for the mother I'd thought I'd known, anger about the years of systematic betrayal, and relief that her death had closed a chapter of my life that could never have had a truly happy ending. Emma joined me at the cemetery, and we stood together in silence, remembering the woman who had given us life while systematically stealing our futures. The flowers we placed on her grave were simple daisies, not the expensive arrangements she would have preferred, but flowers that represented the honest, uncomplicated love we'd wished she could have given us. Do you think she ever really loved us? Emma asked as we walked back to our cars. I think she loved the idea of us, I replied. The successful daughters who made her look good and provided her with financial security. But I don't think she loved us enough to stop stealing from us. The distinction felt important. Mom's crimes hadn't been committed by a stranger, but by someone who claimed to love us unconditionally. Understanding that love and theft could coexist in the same person had been one of the hardest lessons of the entire experience. Driving away from the cemetery that day, I reflected on how profoundly my understanding of family, trust, and financial security had changed since that first phone call about Emma's supposed surgical complications. I'd learned to verify rather than trust, to ask hard questions rather than accept comfortable lies, and to prioritize my own financial protection over maintaining family harmony. The inheritance money that Mom had stolen and partially destroyed had been replaced, but the inheritance of wisdom gained through surviving financial betrayal was perhaps more valuable than any dollar amount. I'd learned to protect myself without becoming cynical, to love my sister without enabling harmful behavior, and to build a life based on honesty rather than comfortable deceptions. Emma and I would never get back the mother we'd thought we had, but we'd gained something equally valuable: the knowledge that we could survive betrayal, seek justice, and rebuild our lives with integrity intact. The price had been higher than either of us would have chosen to pay, but the strength we'd gained might ultimately prove more valuable than any inheritance Mom could have left us. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.